We're going to have a symposium with 3 panelists. And I'm going to call up the panelists and we'll ask them some questions about Rabbi Rosenfeld and see a number of different views. So our first participant I'd like to call up is Rabbi Chaim Kramer. He's not liking the applause. Rabbi Chaim is the founder and principal of VRI, the Breslov Research Institute. Rabbi Chaim is the oldest son-in-law of Rabbi Rosenfeld, and I can't give him an introduction because, like he says, don't give me my husband now. And we all know who Rabbi Chaim is. We're not here. Okay. Our next participant is Mr. Mark Kestenbaum. When Rabbi Rosenfeld was a young Avrech learning in Navardik, New York, Mark's grandfather hired Rabbi Rosenfeld to tutor Mark's father, Sandy, a few times a week. Years later, Sandy Kestenbaum bumped into Rabbi Rosenfeld and hired him to tutor Mark for his bar mitzvah. They learned weekly throughout high school and stayed in touch, even when Rabbi Rosenfeld moved to Israel in his last months of his life, while Mark was learning there for the year. Welcome, Mark. Finally, our third panelist is Rabbi Yehoshua Gerzi. Rabbi Gerzi is the Mor D'Asra of Beis David Pilsner Shul in Ramat Beit Shemesh. With Yichus and Shimish Talmidei Chachamim, Rabbi Gerzi has really been yoinik from a strong Masorah. He's also Talmid Tanafi. But let's just give you a little bit of an introduction for those who don't know. Rabbi Gerzi's mashpiyas to his kahila, a wide range of Torah, from Vilna Gaon to Rav Kook, Hasidus in general, and Breslov in particular. And Rabbi Gerzi never met Rabbi Rosenfeld in person, but he claims that he really was turned on to Pnimis HaTorah, which he teaches daily, from Rabbi Rosenfeld's tapes, which he listened to as a bacher tens of times. So here we have a diverse group. We have first-hand views of a son-in-law, a young Talmud who learned one-on-one with Rabbi Rosenfeld, and another Talmud, strictly from the Shiurim, who has gone on to spread those teachings. So the first question is going to be for Rabbi Chaim Kramer.
Someone's got to be the sacrifice.
Rabbi Chaim, you got to pick up the mic. What in your mind distinguished Rabbi Rosenfeld from all other people that you knew?
I guess the easiest way to explain it is that when he said something, you listened. You heard what he said. It went into your heart, and you tagged along. He was a powerful speaker, a powerful presenter of the ideas that he taught, and he stuck to his guns. He never backtracked. And he said, Rabbi Nachman is the tzaddik emes. That's it, guys. You want tachlis in life? You really want to get where you want to go? This is the way to do it. Right?
Yeah.
He did it. So, it was an incredible experience. And I wouldn't know how to say it other than that I thank Hashem for having been in the right place at the right time, though I was the wrong person.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're going to start with Mark on this one. If you could ask Rabbi Rosenfeld one thing today, what would it be?
My relationship with Rabbi Rosenfeld was probably a lot different from a lot of the people who are here. I met Rabbi Rosenfeld for the first time when I was 12. It was before my bar mitzvah. And my father wanted to strengthen my learning. I was at the yeshiva Flatbush, which was a great place, but my Gemara learning could have been strengthened. So my father hired a rabbi to come to my house and teach me. It was the same rabbi who taught him when he was a student in Midwood High School. Rabbi Rosenfeld had a tremendous effect on me, on my life. And it's hard to think of a question that I would want to ask him today, because throughout my life, Rabbi Rosenfeld passed away when I was 18 years old. So many milestones. My first marriage, my divorce, my raising of my children, my second marriage, the birth of grandchildren, so many milestones in life, so many trials and tribulations that I went through, and I'm sure there are other people who have gone through these kinds of things. And so many times I would have wanted him to be there to ask, Rebbe, what do I do now? What should I do? How should I handle this? How should I approach this? What's the outlook on these kinds of things? And so it's difficult to sit here now, when my life is a little bit calmer, to answer a question like that. I think that, well, one of the things, I was sitting with my friend Peretz Ravel here. Peretz was the first person who opened my eyes to the unbelievable privilege that I had. He came to my house every week and learned with me. We sat for an hour and he read the Gemara and I read it back to him, and he told me stories. He didn't talk about Breslov.
We'll save that for another night.
Right. And when I told Peretz about this, he said, "You mean Rabbi Roosevelt comes to your house and you sit with him alone, just the two of you, sitting and learning?" He couldn't believe it. And only then I realized what a tremendous gift this was. So I think that if there was a question that I was going to ask him today, it would be, can we sit down and learn for an hour together? Can you teach me some Gemara? I would love to, now that my mind is more mature and I've learned so much since then, I would love to be able to have discussions with you at a higher level of Gemara, Rishonim, Achronim, and be able to really appreciate you in a way that I wasn't able to appreciate you before.
Very nice. Rabbi Gerzi, what would you say?
First of all, I just want to have a very, very deep hakaras tov to Rabbi Kramer. Even though we've only met a couple of times, I think myself and many other people in this room are Talmidim of yours. And thank you for not giving up on us and keep on putting out the work, and mamash should go from strength to strength. As well, thank you to everybody who's put this together. I think I would ask the Rav about his relationship with Rav Avram Sternhatz. I love the stories, I love history, and I think I would love to hear him speak about his Rebbe and the connection he had to his Rebbe and what his Rebbe gave to him that he didn't give up. He wasn't a reluctant leader, he wasn't apologetic, he didn't give up. And I think I'd love to hear a lot about that and that relationship.
And finally, Rav Chaim, what would you ask?
I'm used to asking for the world. That's what I would ask. Whatever it is that I can get, please give me. Baruch Hashem, I will say about Breslov research, it's nearly 40 years, because I started shortly after my father-in-law was nifta. And all I asked was, well, let me put it this way. In 1974, I made a trip to Uman. In those days, it was very hard to get there. And whatever happened, it's a long story, I'm not going to go into it. But I was there for 1 hour. I spent 9 days in Soviet Union to be there 1 hour by the Tzir. Not like today, where you want to go, you do whatever you want, a week, a month, you stay where you want, you have food what to eat, you have pizza places, you have restaurants. It's amazing what Uman looks like now. But at the same time, at that time, there was nothing. You had to sneak in, you had to hope, whatever. Hashem helped me, I got there. Before I went, I kept it secret from everybody that I wanted to go. because Rabbeinu Zal says if you want something to be successful, don't talk about it. So I didn't say a word until I had no choice. It was just like a week and a half before I was leaving, and I had no money, and I had a Baruch Hashem. I spoke to my father-in-law, Olav Shalom, about it. I asked him about Umen, what can I do, this and that. And he gave me some advice. I spoke to a friend, Gedalia Flair. He gave me some advice. And I traveled. I was so taken up by the experience of being able to be in Uman by the Tzion. As I was leaving, again, I had just 1 hour. And as I was leaving, Hashem sent me this prayer. Rabbi Nachman, you made a promise to me that if I come here and say the 10 chapters and give some tzedakah, you will stand by my side for the rest of my life, and you will be with me forever. You made such a promise. Like it or not, you're stuck with me. But what I would like to ask is that since you promised that you will do something for me, I'm asking that you intercede on my behalf and allow me to do something for you. That was my prayer back in 1974. When I left the Tzion, I promptly forgot that prayer. It wasn't until about 25 years later that I remembered ever uttering those words. But all this, I can only say that I went into working in Breslov because of my father-in-law. There were times when I came to Eretz Yisrael, I was an electrician, and I was suggested to teach Balei Tshuva. So I went and I spoke to him about it. There were other things that came up that I spoke to him about. I was a wise guy, and I had my differences with him too. I'm ashamed, but I admit it here publicly. Maybe he'll forgive me for that. I don't know. I hope so. But when I moved to Eretz Yisrael, I became very close with him. And there wasn't a thing that went on that I didn't ask him. And what happened was after he passed away, I would go up every week. Once a week, I would make the trip up to Har Zaysim where he's buried, and I would tell him everything that's going on with me, and I would ask for his guidance. And frankly, I don't go as often now as I did then, but I still ask for his guidance. And that's what I would ask.
Thank you. Rabbi Gerzi, why in your mind do you think that this generation is thirsting for the Breslov lessons that Rabbi Rosenfeld was teaching?
Try not to squeak out of the microphone. I just mentioned something to Rabbi Schneider, who's a relative to Rabbi Rosenfeld and one of my mentors. And we spoke about this on Shabbos as well. And maybe a suggestion would be that, number one, in a world where people are so all over the place, people are so unsure. I know as a bocher listening to the tapes, listening to his voice, everything was very sure. There was nothing to be afraid of. There was nothing that could stand in my way. I felt very sure and very proud and very real and authentic. And I think in regards to, just to add on, and I think this is very important as well, in regards to Breslov in general, Rabbi Nachman's Torah, maybe we can suggest like this, which goes back to the Baal Shem Tov, that there's two bechinas to emunah. One bechin of emunah is the emunah of the mind, emunah of the seichel. Emunah of the seichel is the emunah of information. And wow, we have so much information today, more and more and more and more information. One possibly would think that there should be more emunah in the world with more information. However, we see people struggling. I had somebody in my office this morning, over Shabbos. People struggle with their emunah. There's another bechina to emunah, the emunah of the leiv, the emunah of belief. And maybe we can suggest here that the emunah of the leiv is the emunah of allowing oneself to be moved. The Piasetzner writes that everyone needs stimulation, every human being needs stimulation. And if we don't consciously mechaven where our stimulation comes from, it's going to find us, and it's not always the best thing how we become stimulated. Rabbi Nachman's teachings give us permission, and I felt this in the Rav's teachings as well, that he, number one, teaches us how to open up our hearts and to allow ourselves to be moved in certain situations. And as well, I felt that very much in the Rav's teaching, that he gave a focus. This is where one should be open, and this is where one should not be open. And if one is not open in the wrong places, there'll be matzliach. If one is open in the wrong places, they're going to fall. And if one allows themselves to be open in the right places, we mamash shine bright, and we go higher and higher. So maybe that's what I can suggest.
Thank you. Mark, tell us a short story about Rabbi Rosenfeld that nobody in this room knows.
Oh, now it works. Okay. I have 3. I'll do them really quickly. A couple of things that people don't know about Rabbi Rosenfeld. He always drank apple juice. Whenever he came to teach me, he had a tall glass of apple juice on the table waiting for him. When he finished teaching me, he had to drive back to Brighton. He didn't have a car, so my mother would attempt to drive him back, but he wouldn't let her. He wanted to drive the car. And he had a special way of driving. He had his right foot on the gas pedal. Sorry, which is on the right, which is on the left? Right foot on the gas, and his left foot on the brake. He claimed that it was more efficient that way. You didn't have to move back and forth with your feet. And that's the way he drove. He taught us in our living room, and in the living room we had a piano. I was taking piano lessons at the time as well. And my piano teacher, like many piano teachers back then, bought us little statues of the composers when you accomplished a certain feat. So the reward would be a little statue. So I had a statue of Beethoven, I had a statue of Bach, and a statue of Schubert on my piano. Rabbi Rosenfeld came in and he said, "You can't have that here because it's a pesel." I said, "Okay, so should I throw it out?" He said, "No, you don't have to throw it out. Just take a file and file off the nose. And it won't answer the criteria of a pesel anymore." So, being a good Talmud, I took a metal file, and I filed off the nose, and I replaced the statues on the piano. And then my piano teacher came back the next week and got a look at the way I defaced the visages of these brilliant composers. Needless to say, she never got me another statue. The final story is, sorry for taking so much time. Final story is, once I started going, at some point, I started walking to Brighton and going to Brighton Beach to hear Rabbi Rosenfeld's shiurim also on Breslov. And so he started talking to me also more about Kabbalah and Breslov when he saw that I was open to it. And he started going into some deep Kabbalah stories, and what you said before was, about his method of speaking. He was so sure about everything. Everything was so clear. There was no safek, and I think that's one of the things that attracted people to him. So I was having trouble understanding him, and I said what I didn't realize at that point was probably the worst thing I probably could have said to him, which was, "I guess I should wait till I'm 40 years old before I can relearn this stuff." And he hit the ceiling. He said, "No," and I was in Chaim Berlin at the time, so that was kind of the misnagdisha way of approaching Kabbalah. He said, absolutely not. It has nothing to do with age. It has to do with your level of emunah. If you have a level of emunah that's high enough, you can learn this. And if you don't, it doesn't matter how old you are. And I think that this was really indicative of the way he approached everybody. He spread the words of Kabbalah to people of all ages. And he also, just by hearing it from him, he was able to increase your level of emunah.
Thank you. Finally, Rav Chaim, what would you do today to show your Hakaras HaTov to Rabbi Rosenfeld? I know that you're doing a lot of things, but what would you recommend that we do?
Frying pan into the fire. Hakaras HaTov, to recognize what a person did for me, is a tremendous level, right? We have to have that Hakaras HaTov, but to bring out what Rabbi Rosenfeld did for me, that would be something that I would have to really work on. I would have emunah, like was mentioned earlier. I would learn more. That's what he taught us. Daven, be besimcha. There were so many different eitzes that he would work with, and each person on an individual level. What Rabbi Nachman and Rabbi Nosson taught, Rabbi Zvi Aryeh Rosenfeld epitomized. In other words, they taught that you have to make your kesher with Hashem. You have to realize that God created you. You are His servant. Servant. Do what you can. Rabbi Rosenfeld taught us, each one of us, a little differently. He spoke to each one of us a little differently. And each one had their own path, what they did. And that's what I would say. You know, you are who you are, not who you aren't. Now that you are who you are, make the best use of yourself. And do the best that you can. That's what I would suggest if you really want to do it right. Right? Recognize there is a Rebbeinu Shalom, and you could have that direct kesher to him.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.